Alright, good morning, folks! I'm going to shut this door when I realize it's open. Clearly we're in a glass soundproof room, so it's just fine now. It can be as loud as I want. Thanks for coming, folks. I really want to welcome you to this signature event of the Center for Excellence in Teaching, Learning, and Scholarship. We're very fortunate today to have Dr. Stephen Chu here to talk. I'm going to give you a little bit of background on Steve, but before I do that, I do need to give you a little bit of a story of Steve's journey here, because you need to understand that you just got to go easy on the poor guy. So Steve was scheduled to fly in yesterday, land about 8:30. And I got a text saying that his flight was delayed, and so I thought, okay, that's fine. And then I was checking his flight, and it looked like he was going to land around 9 o'clock. Not a problem. Then he texts me after that and says, well, I missed my connecting flight. It looks like I'm going to land at 12:30 in Hartford. Turns out, so he says, just rent me a car, I'll drive to the airport. Turns out the Hartford Airport rental car agencies all closed at 1 a.m. Some at 11. So I called around, found one that was open at 1, said, he's coming, so wait for him. And they were fine, and he got a car, and then drove to the Hilton Garden Inn, where he was promptly told that his room, the only room in the Hilton Garden Inn that was available, was under maintenance. Something was wrong with it. And so they shipped him across town to the La Quinta on Congress Street. And when he got to the La Quinta, they said there was something about their software, so he couldn't check in till around 2. So I got a text from Steve around 2:39 this morning, not around, like at 2:39, and said, I'm here, long story, see you in the morning. So Steve has slept, I swear he's probably slept a good hour, 2 hours. I'm very happy Steve's here. I've known Steve for many years. I'm going to give you just a brief background. He's got a biographical sketch. I could read a lot about it, but I just want to give you some very simple highlights. He's been professor and chair of psych at Stanford University in Birmingham, Alabama since 1993. Steve is trained as a cognitive psychologist and has done extensive work on effective teaching. Steve's work has been highlighted in a YouTube video series that I can give anyone access to. These wonderful videos for helping students understand how to learn, as well as helping faculty understand how to use what we know about how students learn to effectively teach. He's won many, many awards for teaching over the years, including 2 awards from the American Psychological Association, and he's also been named the 2011 Outstanding Masters University and College U.S. Professor of the Year by Carnegie Foundation. So Steve's won extensive awards. He's an outstanding teacher, a great speaker, and I'm really, really happy to have Steve here today to share what he has to say. So let's welcome Steve.
Thanks so much. I appreciate it, and it was certainly worth all the time and effort to get here.
It's a great breakfast at the La Quinta.
That's right. They do a heck of a breakfast. And thank you all for taking the time to come today, and thank everyone at the remote sites as well. So I'm going to give 2 talks, and this first one is going to be sort of an overview of how cognitive psychology can help you in your teaching. You've got a great resource here in Chris, and I want to kind of lay out the different ways that cognitive psychology can help out. So this is kind of what I'm going to talk about in the first talk. I'm going to discuss common teacher and student misconceptions about learning, misconceptions that students have that undermine their learning effectiveness, and misconceptions that teachers have that undermine their teaching effectiveness. So I'm going to suggest in the most polite way possible that you may be suffering under some misconceptions that may be undermining your teaching effectiveness. I'm going to try and replace any misconceptions you have with cognitive principles of learning that can help you to design your teaching more intentionally, design it with a greater chance of success, and then I'm going to talk about how to put those principles into practice. So quite an agenda for this morning, and we'll see how well it goes. There will be a couple activities for you to do, and it's a little awkward. Hopefully it'll be okay with without the tables and things like that. You just need a pen and have that available and let you know when those are coming up. Okay, that's an interesting pattern. It's not supposed to be there. Okay, that was a graphic that is not, let's see, there it is. Okay, so I'm a cognitive psychologist, as Chris said, and you all represent a wide variety of fields. So, history, I understand physical therapy, physical education. How can I, who've never taught or don't know a lot about those fields, help you all out? Well, in order to be an effective teacher, it takes multiple kinds of knowledge. So effective teaching involves knowledge about your field or domain expertise, and that's what we get in graduate school or professional experience, right? And so that part you already have. Then you have knowledge of how people learn your field, what we call pedagogical content knowledge. Okay, this comes with experience in teaching. So this is when you learn, when you need to slow down and spend more time because students have difficulty with certain concepts. Or you can anticipate, you learn to anticipate the kind of misconceptions or misunderstandings they have. Okay, so this is when you, the more you teach, then the more you get a sense of what students have difficulty with and what students actually have less difficulty with. And that just comes with teaching experience. Now, the third part here, this is where I can help you. This is knowledge of how people learn. Okay, so the brain is good at learning certain kinds of things. It's good at doing certain kinds of things, and it's poor at doing certain kinds of things. We know that there's like some serious constraints in terms of learning. Now, in order to be effective, your teaching method has to mesh with the cognitive architecture of the mind. So it's got to take advantage of what the mind does well, and it's got to compensate for those constraints and those weaknesses. And this is how we can help you. The more you know about how the brain works and what its limitations are, the more able you are to design effective pedagogy. And that's kind of what we're talking about today. So the work that I've done is based on this basic idea. The teaching requires a mental model of how students learn, or how people learn. Okay, so this mental model that everyone has, you may not be able to explicitly describe it, but everyone's got this model, determines the kind of pedagogy you prefer. So if you believe that students learn best when they act socially, when they learn peer-to-peer, then you probably have a pedagogy that involves more group work. And you probably use like group work-based pedagogies like problem-based learning or inquiry-based learning or cooperative learning. But if you believe that students learn best when an expert explains concepts, complex concepts in a clear and logical and organized way, then chances are you use more like traditional lecture-based methods. I'm not here to tell you like one method is better than another. I'm here to give you the principles to implement whatever pedagogy you prefer more effectively. Now, to the extent that your teaching, your model of how people learn is correct, you will be a more effective teacher. But if your model is based on untested assumptions or misconceptions, or if your model is missing certain important aspects of learning, then that's going to undermine your teaching effectiveness. And it's going to undermine your ability to respond to certain problems that come up in the classroom, especially if those problems are not part of your mental model. Okay? And most teachers base their pedagogy on untested assumptions, faulty intuitions, and misconceptions. Okay? So I'm going to make that claim, and we'll see if I'm correct. Maybe Springfield College is the exception. Okay. All right. Now, not only do teachers have misconceptions, but students have misconceptions as well. Students also base their behavior on a mental model of how people, they themselves, learn. So they structure their study behavior based on how well they think they learn. So, do I really have to read all of that, or can I just like read the chapter summaries? Do I really have to go to class all the time, or can I just get someone else's notes? All right. So, what is adequate effort for me to master this material? And once again, it determines their learning effectiveness, achievement, and success. If their model is accurate, then they'll be successful students and they'll learn a lot. If their model is inaccurate, then it's going to undermine their teaching effectiveness or their learning effectiveness. And most students also base their learning strategies on untested assumptions, faulty intuitions, and misconceptions. Okay, so I'm going to start with student misconceptions here, and I'm going to talk about the most common misconceptions they have, because you should be aware of these, because this is kind of what you are kind of dealing with, especially if you're dealing with entering students. Okay, so let's talk about the student mindset, especially traditional age students who are coming in right out of high school. So typically a high school student comes in with a GPA of 3.0. They come to Springfield, I'm assuming it's probably higher than that. They've passed a high school exit or graduation exam. They have been tested for achievement and aptitude probably every year since about 4th grade, right? And they've done well enough to pass. And they probably took an entrance exam and they were admitted to Springfield. So they actually have a long history of academic success, right? Now, once they get to college though, how well prepared are they for college level work? And all the evidence is that they actually are not particularly well prepared. So this is a survey that was done asking first year students about their level of preparedness. And half of the students report large gaps in one or more subject areas. So half of the students coming into us are not prepared in at least one or more areas. 83% report some gaps, and so the vast majority of them feel that they aren't adequately prepared. Okay. Now, what does that mean, though, for incoming students? It means that a typical entering college student is inadequately prepared for college level work, and they are blissfully unaware of this fact. So they really believe that they are prepared for college, and they're really not. So I am guessing that when students come to Springfield College for the college tour, they don't ask, like, well, where's the academic success center? Because I'm probably going to struggle in my first year in college, right? This is not part of their mindset. And the problem here is that they may end up struggling for the first time in their life and failing, and they don't recognize this, they can't understand this, and they don't know how to respond to this. And they may respond too late. It's that student who fails 3 exams, then comes to you and says, well, what can I do? Well, by that time, it's really pretty late, right? So you get messages like this. I came to the test really confident, I knew material, but it didn't show that on the test, right? Has anyone ever kind of heard the feedback like that? Right, okay, the reason I've stuck the course along is because I believe I've put in a lot of effort, and I just haven't tested well. That notion that if I put in a certain amount of effort, that somehow the effort should count towards my grade, right? Okay, and then the last one, I felt prepared going into the first 2 exams, scored much lower than I wanted. Much lower than class. To be completely honest, I've not wanted to come to class because I do not feel it's worth, but I'm not going to do well anyway. So in other words, this is my failure experience, and this is the way I'm going to cope with failure. I'm going to stop going to class, as if that is a constructive response, right? And so a lot of our students don't know how to respond to academic failure because they've never actually had that before. And this is a non-constructive response. The students that I really am concerned with in my work is those students who are capable of doing well in college, of succeeding in college, but they're unprepared and they struggle in the first year, and maybe they become discouraged, or maybe they dig themselves into such a deep hole that they can't succeed when they actually have the ability to do so. All right, so that's kind of the mindset. So let's talk about how the mindset works in particular, and then how to try and overcome it. Okay. First of all, as Chris mentioned, I have a video series out on YouTube. The reference is in the handout. Everyone should have a handout here. It's a series of 5 basic videos. There is an introductory video that's optional for you, but it's 5 basic videos. Each is about 7 or 8 minutes long. And each kind of addresses a different aspect of the learning situation. And I did this in order to save you time. Okay, so if you are working with students, you can work with them by saying, go watch this video series or watch this particular video, then come in and then we'll talk. So that will save you the time of having to explain how to, the basic principles of studying and things like that. And the last one is, I blew the exam, now what? So this is for those students who failed an exam are not sure what to do next. So every college faculty member has a spiel that they have with students who have failed an exam. It's like, don't be discouraged, it's not been, the majority of points are still out there, and we need to make these changes. So what I did was I recorded my spiel, and that way you can assign my spiel, and then you can actually spend your time working with the student, talking about the specific change you need to make in your class. Okay, so that resource is out there, and it is free and available for you to use. Okay, a lot of faculty have this listed on their syllabus. So let's talk about specific, and a lot of the information you're going to talk about at this point is in that video series. The specific misconceptions students have. Here are the 4 most common misconceptions that students have that undermine their learning effectiveness, their study effectiveness. Okay, the first one is that learning is fast. Students grossly underestimate the amount of time it takes to master material. Okay, they really believe they can read faster and they can learn faster than they actually can. As a result of that, they wait too late to start. Okay, so a lot of students think that to study for an exam, what I need to do is to plan my study so that the night for the exam I'll have read everything for the first time. Right? and so they think that's being really well prepared. So in my general psych class, I'll tell them a week before, I say, if you plan to do well, you should have finished reading everything now. Okay, because you learn more during review than you do reading in the first time. And so that's just a foreign concept to the students. It's like, why should I finish 3 days in advance? And because you learn more during review. Okay. And there's actually a study that just came out in Teaching of Psychology that explains why this might be true. And this is, they found in this research that students have this imaginary norm of how much other students are studying. They tend to believe that they're already studying more than other students are. And so they think that they're already putting in a greater effort. They actually underestimate, other students are studying more than they think they are. And so their calibration is all wrong. It's especially true if they're living in the dorms, because there's always a party going on somewhere in the dorms. So you just feel like I'm being the studious one because I spent an hour studying, and no one else did that. Okay, so I tell my students, you're going to have this assumption. Always give yourself an extra couple of days, because the worst thing that happen to you is you'll actually get prepared early. You'll be done early, But just assume that you're underestimating the amount of time things are going to be required. Okay, being good at a subject matter is being good at subjects is a matter of inborn talent rather than hard work. You're probably familiar with Carol Dweck's work on growth mindset and fixed mindset. Okay, the idea of being good at a subject matter of inborn talent is a fixed mindset. You're either naturally good at something or naturally bad at something. You're either good at writing or you're bad at math, and this is inborn and unchangeable. Okay, so nothing you do can change this. And this fixed mindset is related to a number of really poor academic outcomes, because you don't believe that your effort is actually going to affect your success. So if you have a failure experience, then that is personally threatening to you, because there's nothing you can do to overcome it. Dweck says it really well. She said, if you have a fixed mindset, then effort is a sign of failure. That you should be naturally good at something, and if you actually have to try at something, then that is showing weakness, and you shouldn't be. That shouldn't be true to you. And then the success of others is quite threatening to you, because maybe they're more talented than you are. And that's the kind of student who disappears after a failure experience, because there's nothing they can do to overcome it. Right? A growth mindset, on the other hand, sees their learning as an outcome of their effort. Right? And so we need to cultivate that growth mindset among our students. Now, here are just some of the things that we talked about. The challenges that students with a fixed mindset avoid challenges because it's an opportunity for failure. There's nothing to do to overcome it. Whereas a student with fixed growth mindset will embrace their challenge and see it as a way to get better. And students who have fixed mindset give up easily, whereas students with growth mindset will persist. Okay. So there's a number of different factors. Now, how do we sort of address this? This is the way I do it at Sanford. This is the ACT score along the x-axis here. This is first semester GPA. This is actual data from a recent year at Sanford. What I show them is that, up here in the top, these are the 4.0. These are like excellent first year GPA. Notice that you can have an excellent GPA at any ACT score. Okay, so yes, there is a correlation about 0.4 or so between ACT score and first year GPA. But look at that variability. Okay, what's causing that variability? Well, two things. First of all, your commitment to working, to learning. Then second, of course, is excellent teaching, which of course we have at Springfield and we have at Stanford. But you can excel at any ACT score. Okay, so don't think that you are defined by this. And there's this preoccupation with ACT score. I've got a son who's a senior in high school, and there's just this obsession with getting a certain kind of ACT score. And students think that now that I've gotten up to like 30 or 31, then that's all I have to do. And no, you can actually score badly, in a GPA with a high ACT score. So you're not your ACT score that got you in here. Now you are your dedication to learning. This is your commitment to learning. Okay? And this is some examples of growth mindset for my own students. I teach statistics, and there I run into math anxiety a lot. And so I had one of my students who always wrote herself a note, "You can do it," so then she was encouraging herself. And then this is from a student who did really poorly in the first exam, but she did much better on the second. She made A on the second exam, and she wrote it on the end. She says, "I studied hard," and I said, "Yeah," and it shows, right? So, really kind of rewarding that kind of growth mindset. Okay, all right. So knowledge is composed of isolated facts. This is a real problem, because this is one of the most robust findings in literature, is that students who struggle tend to approach knowledge as being composed of isolated, unrelated facts. So they memorize definitions, right? So in psychology, in introductory textbooks, they're actually geared towards this, where they have like bolded terms, they have definitions in the glossary. At the end, you've got this list of key terms, and it's almost like inviting you, like, memorize me, and you have like now understood this chapter, right? And then students get flashcards, and they spend all their time making flashcards and memorizing definitions and things like that. There's nothing wrong with flashcards, except the only downside is it makes it easy to study badly. And then you've got Quizlet or other kinds of electronic flashcards, which make it really easy to study badly. Okay, so if students, the weird thing about Quizlet is the free version makes it easy to study badly. You have to pay for the premium version, which actually allows you to put the context in there, which actually allows you to study more effectively. So I tell students, if you're going to use flashcards, make sure that you have an example or an application, or you have a connection, like this is related to these other concepts. And actually concept maps, which I'll talk about this in the second talk, is a much better way to go, because it focuses the relatedness of the different concepts. So students really fall in this trap of all I need to do is look at the bolded terms if I'm reading the textbook and I know, and then of course they take out the highlighter and they highlight the term that's already bolded, and so they do it that way. Okay, so that's kind of the mindset that you're dealing with. It's not just that students are coming into you, learning the material. They have these attitudes and these beliefs that you need to address and get them over that in order to learn your material successfully. Now let's talk about some other aspects of learning that are important for you to understand, and that is the nature of attention. Okay, the metaphor that's used now for attention is like a small spotlight in a darkened room. Another has a very narrow focus, and anything that draws your focus away from what you're supposed to be paying attention to is going to hurt. Now that metaphor is actually a little inadequate in one really critical way for teaching. That is that you're only seeing a narrow focus of the room, but you believe you're seeing the entire room. Okay, you are convinced that you are seeing everything in that room, when in fact you're only seeing a small part of that room. All right, so there are a number of reasons why this is the case. So the first one is something called inattentional blindness. Okay, we only see a small portion of a scene, but we're convinced that we're seeing the whole thing. Now, we can miss tremendous amounts of activity or events outside of our focus awareness and be completely oblivious to them. Okay, this is why students think that they can, check their text messages or shop on Amazon and not miss anything. So they are surfing the web, and you say, you say, oh, but you can't do that. He goes, oh, I've heard everything that you've said, right? I haven't missed a thing, because they're not aware of the sheer amount of material that they've missed. Okay, so you've got to be aware of this, and I try and make students aware of this. This is my favorite example of inattentional blindness. this is a whale watching excursion off the west coast, and everyone's looking off the right side. I don't know if you can see the picture, for a little, like a spout or a fin or a tail or something like that. And they miss the whale. So you can miss a tremendous amount of material about this, and students aren't aware of everything that they miss. Okay, another part is attentional blink. Attentional blink says that we can't simply shift attention immediately. Every time we shift attention, there's this blink, this period of a few minutes where we're not processing information very well. You've probably experienced attentional blink where you're focused on a task, you get distracted, you can't immediately refocus on the task. It takes you a few minutes to kind of regather yourself and focus. That's attentional blink. And every distraction you have, it takes about 4 or 5 minutes of attentional blink. So in this research, what they did was they had people learning these small, these short lists of words, and then at some point they either had to receive a text or send a text. And as soon as they received or sent a text, their learning went down by about 25 to 30%, right? And then it took about 5 minutes to recover. Okay, 5 minutes. So every distraction that you experience, every blink or every buzz or vibration or any sort of distraction is 5 minutes. Okay, 12 distractions you've wasted an hour. Right? It's that easy. Okay, so let's see just how this attentional blink works. We're going to do an activity that's going to sort of test your ability to multitask, to avoid distraction. So in order for this to do this one, I'm going to have you all partner up. So grab a partner. If you're alone, if remotely, you can do this on your own. If you don't like anyone else in the room, you can You're going to need a pen or a pencil, and you're going to need your smartphone.
And we have extra pens if anyone did not bring one, so. Anyone else need it?
We are perfectly there.
Alright.
Okay, we got a pen or pencil and a partner. Okay, so you're going to take turns. One of you is going to be the kind of the subject, the other is going to be the experimenter. You're going to time. One of you is going to time the other doing these tasks. Okay. Then when you get done, you're going to switch, and then you time your partner. Okay. So the first part of this, I want you to do the following. Okay. I want one of you to, as quickly as you can, count down from 10 to 0. Then immediately say the alphabet out loud from A through K. So 10 to 0, A through K. Just do it out loud and do it as fast as you can, and your partner is timing you, and then write down the time that you take, and then switch roles. Okay, so go ahead and do that.
I don't know. I think I'll let you know.
Timer
Are you ready?
You want a 1, 2, 3?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's dumb. It took me so long. I'll wait a few. 1, 2, 3. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M, N, O, P, Q, R, S, T, U, V, W, X, Y, Z. Come on, I
got that first task? All right, so here's the second. So everyone's time each other. Okay, so here's the second task. Now you're going to time each other doing this. Now I want you to alternate between the alphabet. So start with 10A and then count down and then the alphabet. So 10A, so time each other doing that. Okay?
Yes. 9, B, 8, C, 7, G, 6. There's no G and there's no J and there's no. I might have done the same thing. I'm just write it down. You didn't say it had to be right. Oh, poorly. 4.18 was our You got a 20. Yeah, he left that J. I mixed some stuff up. You did have to be right. You got the J. I don't know how you got that.
Once you're done, you can provide your second time or your first time.
Oh, yeah.
Unit task. Okay. Everyone got their time? Okay, everyone got the division? Wait, I didn't want to interrupt because people were really concentrating. Okay, all right. So you should divide your second task time by your first task time. So the first time you were actually focusing on one task at a time. You did one task, the next task. Okay, the second time you were multitasking, you're switching back and forth. Could you feel attentional blink there? Yes. Right, okay. So if your ratio here was less than 1, you're actually better at multitasking than sort of focusing one task at a time. Right. If it was 1, then you're just as good at multitasking as monotasking. If it was over that, it shows how much slower you are, right? So if you're like at a 3, that means you're 3 times slower multitasking than unitasking. 2 or 3 is actually pretty good. A lot of times they have like 5 or 6. Don't worry if you're really up there. Okay. So 3 is pretty typical. Now keep in mind that these are 2 really simple, familiar tasks, right? Now imagine how much slower you are if you're trying to learn complex, unfamiliar information. How much slower you are in multitasking. So I do this to students and I show them the following. So if it, let's say, takes you 3 times longer to multitask than to study it with distraction than just focusing a single task. So if you were trying to learn something that took 30 minutes of full focus, okay, then that 30 minutes becomes 90 minutes, right? Now, if you can teach yourself to study with full focus, you could actually study for 30 minutes and have 60 minutes of guilt-free time, right? So it is really in our students' best interest to learn how to study with complete focus. And there's actually research into people with quote-unquote good willpower, strong willpower, and it turns out, oh, I don't want to get to that yet. It turns out that the people are not different from other people. They don't have like a higher amount of certain trait. What they're really good at is arranging a situation which removes temptations, right? So they don't just have their phone sitting in front of them, and the evidence is actually just having the phone in front of you where it might buzz at any minute actually reduces learning. They put it in a drawer in a different room. Okay. And I suggest to students, if you have a roommate, make a pact. We're going to put our phones away. We're going to just reinforce that we are going to both study for 30 minutes. Then we'll take a 5-minute break, and we'll time ourselves so that 5-minute break doesn't become 25 or 30 minutes. There's different ways of doing it. I've always thought that it would really be interesting for a college to set up a study hall or a study area where phones are not allowed. Okay, so you actually have to check it in as you go in, because the mindset of students is that if I receive a text, then it's the polite thing to do is to respond right away, right? If I don't respond right away, I'm being rude. So we can be the bad guys for that. We can say, oh, I was in the device-free study hall, so I couldn't, the evil Springfield College prevented me from responding, and that might be an advantage. Okay. All right. Now, how does this affect you as teachers? Okay. So you've got to be really aware of not having distracting details as you teach. A big part of effective teaching is attention management. You need to know what your students are attending to at any given point. Okay, so I always work with my new faculty. I go watch them teach to give them feedback. And what I see a lot of new teachers doing is fighting their PowerPoint. so that their PowerPoint is up in one, you put a PowerPoint slide up, and what of course students want to do right away, they want to copy down everything that's PowerPoint. And if you're talking while the PowerPoint is up, you're competing with your PowerPoint. You're creating that distraction, okay? And the fellow who does research on this calls them seductive details. You have clip arts, you've got GIFs, you've got cute stuff. You've even got like that PowerPoint frame and animations, and you're actually fighting your PowerPoint. Okay. A great example of this, I had a grad student who was teaching for us, and she was describing Pavlovian conditioning, class conditioning, and book publishers send like slides. They'll provide these things, and these are prepared by like designers. They aren't prepared by like teachers, and they tend to have like cute, stock photos and clip arts and things like that, which is actually the last thing you really want. So my student, my faculty member was talking, explaining Pavlovian conditioning, and there was this stock photo of cute puppies up there in the middle. And so I'm looking at it, and everyone is looking at cute puppies, thinking of all the cute puppies they've ever seen. Have you ever had enough of the cat gift? No? Okay. All right. So that's just. So there's no evidence that multitasking is effective as concentrating one task at a time. Good study strategy, I always tell the students, are effortful, they require full concentration. So the students, we have to help our students by, in class, maintaining full focus. And in my video series, I talk about the importance of maintaining full focus. So resisting temptation is a distraction. Even small distractions reduce learning. So there's no such thing as a momentary distraction. And when I talk to the students, I kind of emphasize this fact because there are just so many distractions. And the problem we have is that like the same portal that gets us the learning material is also a source of tremendous distractions. So you'll notice that I don't have like any sort of clip arts or things like these. Are just plain slides. This is kind of part of universal design. This really helps the students, especially those with like attention deficit disorder. The less distraction they have, but the better off they are. Okay, so that is attention. Now, I've covered a couple of topics here, and I want to make sure that this is as useful to you all as possible. So, are there any questions at this point? Yeah.
Is listening to music on this spectrum of distraction?
That's a great question. The question is listening to music a problem? Is it a distraction? The answer is yes, it is a distraction. But here's the thing about music. Music has positive qualities as well. So it's energizing. This is the reason when you go to Zumba or something like that, you don't do it in silence. You actually like the music that's going on. So it's energizing. It raises your mood. And if you live in a dorm, it actually can mask out even more distracting sounds. Okay. So when students ask me this, I always say you have to do like a cost-benefit analysis here. Is listening to music more? Do the benefits outweigh the costs? And if you do listen to music, then I always tell them to listen to very familiar music. Don't listen to unfamiliar music. Make sure it doesn't have lyrics in it, because that's almost always distracting. It turns out if you look on YouTube or you go to Spotify or Pandora, they have playlists of like 4 or 5 hours of like jazz, without lyrics and things like that, specifically for studying or new age kind of meditative music. You can find that kind of music that would be good. So is music a distraction? Yes, but does it have benefits also? Yes. So if you're like me, certain things I have to do in silence, other things I do with music. When I grade, I've got to have music because it just kind of helps me, to get through there. And grading is not at least usually it's not a super mentally demanding kind of a task. Other questions? Yes.
I have a standing desk at work and at home, but I'm thinking of possibly trying one of those treadmill desks where you're walking. Mm-hmm. Would that be distracting? Or
that's a really good question, and there's actually, I'm only familiar with a little research on standing desks or treadmill desks, and the evidence that I've seen, and this is incomplete, is that those kind of desks don't necessarily improve like learning, but they, once again, they may have benefits and, you know, and drawbacks. So I couldn't tell you about that. Once again, I would guess like it's probably energizing, it keeps your energy level up, but you know, yeah, you know, trying not to trip or fall or things like that may, you know, also be a problem there as well. I see another question over here. Yeah.
Yeah, Susan and I are having a little side conversation about technology in the classroom. So like last semester, I was like, we're done, not just no technology. But then I was like handicapped in some ways because there are education. That's a dual purpose of the portal. So this semester, it's all technology all the time. It's driving me nuts. Can you talk to me about how you balance those things for students and train new teachers?
Yeah, balancing technology and learning it's an eternal problem, and there's not a simple issue. There's not a simple resolution. So some faculty say, well, no technology in the classroom, which I think is it's not a solution I would choose, and part of it is because students have accommodations, and the last thing we want to do is make them feel like singled out for that reason. And I've had students who have actually done better. I mean, I had a student who was struggling and said, I'm going to take notes by laptop. And I go, well, you know, the evidence is that it may not be helpful. But he actually did much better because his problem was he couldn't write fast enough to get stuff down. Now, and the work that's come out about like using like laptops and things like that, people have kind of, I think, over-interpreted that. Because you know, every time you go to a professional conference and you see people like taking notes, a lot of them are just taking notes on laptops. So that's because they know how to take notes, right? Now the technology there is similar to what I just talked about with Quizlet. If you have a student who does not have good note-taking strategies, taking notes on laptop sort of invites bad note-taking. Okay, note-taking is more than just taking stenography or taking dictation. As a matter of fact, that's the last thing you want to do. Note-taking should be engaging you. It should be forcing you to think about what's important and not important. Okay. Now, if you can do that and take effective notes, it doesn't matter what medium you take notes on. But the idea is like our students are going to fall that temptation of taking dictation without really sort of paying attention to the meaning. And so there, I tell students if you're struggling, you might want to try like taking notes on by hand. Because the advantage there is so slow and effortful, it really makes you think, is this worth writing down or not? You know, and so I think that's a real advantage. So it's working with the students, and you know, at a smaller school, you can talk to them about like the proper and improper uses of technology there. So there's no easy answer, I'm afraid, to that question. Yeah.
So your comment is perfect setup for my comment, which is that I've been using a no-tech policy. Like, I use tech in the classroom, but typically if we're not using it in the classroom, then students need to put it away. And the reason for that has to do with the distractibility issue that you're talking about, which is that our students, or it could be because I mostly teach general education courses, the level of investment for students is not that high. And so they are constantly tempted, right? And they're not taking notes, and they're not watching a PowerPoint, or if I'm using one. What they're doing is they're shopping, and they're watching, you know, the football game. And I just can't, you know, and I do a lot of discussion-based class, right? And so students are checked out, you can't do much.
And there's been a number of approaches to kind of dealing with the misuse of technology, because it's the weakest, it's the most vulnerable students who are most likely to misuse the technology, right? And so you can have like a contract that for the students is like, you know, if my grade is below an A, then I will not allow myself to, you know, I will put the technology away. You know, so you can't enforce it, but, you know, if the students, you know, are you know, it's kind of like a promise they make to themselves. So that may help some of the students there. People have tried like no technology, like zones, and I'm kind of mixed success with that. There was another solution that came to mind, and now I'm not able to remind myself. What did you
I have no idea if this is what you were thinking, but there are certain programs that you can put on your laptop
Yeah.
that will not let you use anything except for like Microsoft Word.
Yeah.
So you could have a contract with your students where they have to install that if they want to use their laptop, and then they would literally only be able to take notes while still being able to type faster.
Yeah, that's a good, so yeah, there's different kinds of apps and software that allow you to do that sort of thing. I'm just trying, I had another approach, and I can't remember exactly what I'm afraid. If I think of it, I'll bring it up again. So, yeah.
I was just going to say, there's also, I don't know if this is what you're thinking, there's a researcher who talks about tech breaks and doing that. So
Yeah.
it's, everyone has to agree for X amount of time, we're going to put away our phones. And then someone will yell out tech break and you have 1 minute to check your phone and do that. And then you extend it gradually.
Oh, there you go. Yeah.
Researchers have
That's a great
That's a
approach.
distraction.
That's a distraction.
But then you realize, that 1 minute, it's going to take 4 or 5 minutes to refocus everybody.
Exactly. So there's pros and cons, yeah.
Actually, the other approach I just thought of was that there's good evidence that the distraction is not just for you, but it's for the people around you. So, students are responsive. They care more about their peers. They care about our opinion of them. So if you say that by doing this you're hurting those around you, then that may mean more to them than us saying that you shouldn't be doing this. Isn't good for you. It's not just hurting you. It's hurting people around you.
Right, so I have a community-based accountability system with my no tech policy, and so that everybody gets a reward if nobody uses tech, and everybody gets a penalty if somebody does.
Oh, okay. Well, there you go. So, all right. Let's talk about metacognition here. I'm actually running out of time here, but we'll talk about a couple more topics here. So, metacognition is actually in psychology, it's your awareness of your own thought processes. For our purposes, it's your awareness of your own level of understanding of a topic. And good students, strong students have excellent metacognition. They know when they have mastered material successfully, and they know when to stop studying. Weaker students have a very poor sense of metacognition. They tend to be overconfident, and they believe they've mastered material when they really haven't. There are big gaps in their understanding, and their understanding is very shallow. Okay. Now, it's one of the key distinctions between a stronger student and a weaker student. And one of the major tasks for an incoming student is to develop an accurate sense of metacognitive awareness. It is not just that students don't have a sense of metacognitive awareness, it's they have a sense of metacognitive awareness that was honed probably in high school and middle school, and it was functional there, and then they come to Springfield and it's counterproductive here. That's the problem. They have to unlearn their old sense of poor metacognitive awareness. So this is one way of trying to address this. At the end of my first exam in general psych, I put this question on there. It's on the last page of the last question. What's your best, most accurate judgment of the percentage of questions you answered correctly? So 0% how well do you think you did? Right? And then I can plot this there it is. Okay. I can plot this on a graph. So on the x-axis is how people actually did, 0 to 100%. And then on the y-axis is their judgment of how they did, 0 to 100%. If they have good sense of metacognition, then they'll fall along the diagonal here. Okay. Now, if they fall below the diagonal, you see some people did fall below the diagonal, then they got a really pleasant surprise. They did better than they thought they did. There aren't that many people down here. These people are practicing what's called strategic pessimism, where they are hoping for the best, but they are preparing for the worst. And that's actually a really good mindset for students to actually have coming in, because they tend to over-prepare. Okay, now notice the strongest students, the one from 90 to 100%. Okay, notice how tightly clustered they are. The strong students know when they have mastered material. They know when to start, they know when to stop, and they are accurate. Now look at the D's and F's. Okay, you see this majority of students here. These are the students with poor metacognitive awareness. Okay, so this poor soul up here thought they, he or she had aced the exam and made it, or D and F. When I talk to students, I say, see this person, don't be this person. Okay? Now, students have this poor sense of metacognitive awareness, and they can't just immediately compensate for it. It's an ingrained habit. So the best that students can do is to be aware that their sense of their own understanding is really poor. And so what these students need is opportunities for self-assessment, where they can take like practice exams or problems, and they can get feedback, and they learn how to use that feedback. And I'll talk about how formative assessments can help with that in the second talk today. But that's metacognition. So the irony of poor metacognition is that students with the poorest metacognition have no clue to how weak their understanding of a concept is. So these are the students who don't come to you because they just can't understand why they're doing poorly, right? These are the students who come and say, I was so confident when I left the exam, how could I have made a D, right? That's poor metacognition. And it's a general principle of psychology. The big part of being incompetent is not realizing just how incompetent you are. So if you take any skill and you look at the bottom quartile of that skill and you ask people to rate themselves, they'll rate themselves almost always in the top half, if not, the top quartile. So people, think they're funny when they're not funny at all. They think they're really socially skilled and charismatic when no one can stand them. They think they're like great drivers. They can't understand they've been in 5 accidents in the last year, right? So the students who most need to improve their study strategies are the ones who don't believe they need to. And these are the ones who are reluctant to come in to you and talk to you about it. So some faculty have policies where everyone's got to come in and just chat for a little bit and just get them to come in because they don't believe they really need to. They can't understand why they're doing badly, but they don't think seeing you is going to help. The other thing is that this also holds true for teachers. Okay, so the teachers who most need to be here today are not here because they think that they are perfectly fine in teaching. So you obviously are the cream of the crop. Springfield College. Yes. All right. I'm just going to do a couple of them. I had actually another demonstration. I'm not going to have time. I have 2 demonstrations. I'm going to do one. I'm not going to do the other. But let's just do a poll here about how accurate your beliefs are about how people learn. What I want you to do is I want you to think about, look at these 5 factors. I want you to pick the single factor you think is most important for learning. You just quietly do yourself. Okay, everyone got it? Okay, this is what we're going to do. I'm going to count to 3. On the count of 3, everyone's going to put up their hand with the number of fingers indicating their answer. So we're all going to participate. We're all going to do this at the same time. So you can't do what students always want to do. Wait and see what everyone else says first. All right? Okay, ready? 1, 2, 3. Put up hands. Okay, looking around. I see 5s. I see 1s. I see 3s. I see no consensus whatsoever. Okay, now, what does that mean? It means basically that whatever the correct answer is, majority of you actually got it wrong. Right? So if you got it wrong, then that may be undermining your effectiveness as a teacher. This kind of gets back to what I said about, if you have misconceptions, then that's affecting your teaching. All right, now I'm not going to have a chance to do this activity here. But let me tell you about a theory of learning from the 1970s called levels of processing. It's no longer current, but it's very useful for teachers and students to know. It sees memory as being composed of a continuum of levels from shallow to deep. So shallow processing involves focusing on appearance and sound and doing meaningless sort of repetition, like just reading things over and over again without thinking about it, or rote memorization of flashcards and things like that. Okay, and it does not lead to long-term learning. Okay, so that's shallow processing. Deep processing involves subjective meaning, where you take information, you integrate it with what you already know. It is effortful, it is time-consuming, but it's the most effective way to learn information at a deep level. Okay, so this is relating information to prior knowledge and other information that you have. So making information personally meaningful. Okay, so deeper processing leads to better learning. Right, now there's a lot of research on this which shows that deeper processing leads to better recall. And what's critical here, though, for you to understand is that the intention to learn doesn't matter. Okay, so you can be told that there's going to be a learning test, you need to do as well on it as possible, but if you use a shallow strategy, a poor learning strategy, you're not going to learn. Okay, even if you want to learn, the motivation to learn is high. And also, even if you don't intend to learn, if you process information deeply, you'll still learn it. You'll learn it just as well as someone who uses a deep strategy and is trying to learn the material. If you think about it for a second, most of our learning is incidental. It's unintentional. So we read a book or see a story and we think about it deeply and we can remember it later. We're not thinking, I need to memorize this because someone may ask me a test, give me a test about this later, right? So it's deep processing that matters. It's not actually motivation to learn. I tell students that good intentions cannot overcome bad study strategies, right? Now, this is important for you to understand because you should look at all of your learning activities, all of your assignments, in terms of the depth of processing. What is it making my students think about? Okay, if you're making your students think about sort of rote, meaningless things, you're actually hurting their learning. Okay, but if your activities make them think about information in an elaborated, related way, then you're actually helping their learning. Okay, so the correct answer there is what you think about while you're studying. Okay, so attention, it is necessary, but it's not sufficient. Right, so paying attention is important, but you can pay attention at a very superficial level. All right, you can pay attention but not really think deeply about it. Okay, and time is important, but it's not sufficient. You've got to think deeply about the material. There was a question in there about learning styles. There's a lot of good research on learning styles, and there's nothing to learning styles. Okay, so learning styles is a myth. Okay, it actually doesn't affect us. I don't know. I didn't learn about learning styles until I started teaching, and I don't know about when Chris first learned about learning styles, but when I learned about them, my reaction is, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. Because the human mind is much more complex than you have one way of learning. You have multiple ways of learning. To tell students you only have one way of learning is to limit them. Right? And we want our students to be able to think in as many different ways as possible, because when they graduate from here, the successful person is going to be the most adaptable person. Right? So we need to cultivate multiple ways of learning. Okay. All right. All right. So implications for learning strategies, a huge impact on learning for better or for worse. Good intentions cannot overcome poor study strategies. So here are, and this is in the hand, here are some guidelines for helping you to understand deep and shallow processing. Okay, these are some principles you can use to guide deep processing. Elaboration. Am I having students think about related concepts? Distinctiveness. Okay, how is this concept different from other concepts? So highlighting distinctness. And this is really critical because we suffer from the curse of expertise, the curse of knowledge. We don't remember what it was like not to know something. And we've been, applying our craft for like years and years. So these distinctions are obvious to us, but they're not obvious to the student. So we really need to highlight those distinctive qualities. Okay, personal. If you can, students can relate something to their personal experience, that makes it much more powerful, much more memorable. And then appropriate to retrieval and application, giving them an opportunity to retrieve the information and use the information is a very powerful learning technique. When I tell students, one of the most underutilized but effective study strategies is to close your notes, close your book, and just write out everything you can remember. Okay, it's uncomfortable, it's unpleasant, but it actually leads to the best recall. And you can give them, like in your classes, give them like sample problems to work through, and just say, don't rely on your notes. It's, this is the way the test is going to go. So you should use your test yourself under testing conditions and see how well you do. Right, and that will really help them with learning. And one exposure is not enough. This is Nett Hall's rule of 3. Greg Nett Hall wrote this great book called The Hidden Lives of Learners, which is one of my favorite. He found that for long-term learning, it takes exposure on 3 different occasions. So on 3 different occasions, all the information has to be present. You actually have to think about it in a deep way and a comprehensive way. 3 separate occasions. So this, one study period is not going to be enough. So in theory, the first time should be in class when you explain material. Maybe the second time be in review, and the students probably have to create that 3rd time. And 3 is a minimum, right? It's complex concepts are going to take more time than that. So I'm going to stop there. What I've tried to do in this first session is to sort of convince you that cognitive psychologists like Chris and myself can help you to design your pedagogy more effectively. I'm sure Chris is going to have many more activities that will help out with this. I've talked about attention and metacognition and deep processing. Hopefully you can use those concepts in your own teaching, whatever teaching style you have, to be more intentional about designing your teaching for student learning. So thank you so much.
Thank you.